This program is sponsored by the Church of God International and supported by our viewers.
The Bible describes in the end times a one-world government, or a one-world order. It's characterized as a socialistic coalition of 10 kings combining their power and assets with an individual labeled as a beast with fierce countenance and who understands dark sentences. His power will be mighty, and through his policies craft shall prosper in his hand. He shall magnify himself by the prosperity that's generated, and will destroy many. He will speak out against God, thinking to change times and laws for advantage and domination over many people, kindreds, and tongues. He shall also exercise war against the saints and wear them out, prevailing over them until Jesus Christ actually returns. What exactly should we be looking for as we proceed into the latter days? Are today's world events illustrating the trends that will finally lead to this condition the Bible describes as a time that, if not shortened, no man would remain alive? Stay with us as we explore this event on today's edition of the Armor of God.
In times like these, we need the armor of God for the well-being of our families, to help you stand in the evil day. The Church of God International presents Armor of God, a program of biblical understanding. And now your host, Bill Watson.
Well, hello, and again, welcome to another international edition of the Armor of God. Good to be with all of you once again. You know, I do hope you'll stay with us for the full duration of the program, because it's really about the only way you're going to get the full context of what I'm going to be talking about. We have a very interesting topic, if I may say so myself. So I want to mention this and lay down this premise right out of the box. Are you ready? Follow me through this. A returning to something assumes a preceding departure. That's right. A returning from something assumes a preceding departure. And what that basically is alluding to and providing the notion of is the fact that the past never does disappear. The past is always with us. Even though the past may be absent in the present, it's said to be that that's just an illusion. Now, this is based on the metaphysical theory that the ontology of time is eternal. Now, I don't know if that's true, but I do know this, that in the field of psychology, in the analysis of psychoses, the fact remains is that that is true, because tendencies, proclivities, trends and or predispositions are indeed embedded in us, perhaps from our past, that if the right conditions and circumstances do occur, somebody comes along, a friend, a place, an odor, a location, a music, a song of some sort, brings back a trigger, guess what happens? You run the risk of the past coming forward into the present, and you're revisited with the past manifesting itself in the present. Now, history's like that too. Many of you, I'm sure, are well familiar with the statement that history repeats itself. Oh, I get it. You know, there are styles and there are fashions. Things change in many respects over the course of years in regards to how things play out. Technology changes, provides all of us certain benefits and differences from times before. But the fact of it is, what goes around oftentimes comes back around, maybe in a different form, but nevertheless, the fact of it is it does indeed repeat. Now, the Bible has a similar principle in relationship to its explanation about a coming world ruling government in the future. Turn with me over here. I'm already there for the sake of time. In Revelation chapter 13 and in verse 3, let me point this out regarding this principle of the past coming forward and revisiting the present. Notice this. And I saw one of his heads, this is Revelation 13, verse 3, as it were wounded to death. And this Greek word means that basically it was slain, it was killed. This particular one which had a head that was wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. This beast had a deadly wound, which means that it was killed, it was dead. But then it came back alive. It was healed. The past was healed, and it came forward into the present. And now the beast is back alive. Notice over here in verse 12, similar thing here talking about the second beast who gives homage to the first beast. But in verse 12, the point that I want to make here is it causes the earth and them that dwell therein, that is this second beast, to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. Now this principle of the past coming into the present for the future is articulated very clearly in Revelation 17. Let me turn your attention now to 17 with respect to this beast. He states here, John does, here in this verse 8, the beast that you saw was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. So it was, it isn't, but then it is. And he articulates this toward the end of this verse where he says, here in verse 8 toward the bottom, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world when they beheld the beast that was, is not, and yet is. What do you make of this? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about this as we go forward, but let me interrupt myself. We'll revisit it here in a moment. Stay with me, because like I said, you got to stay with me in order to really appreciate and acquire the context of where I'm going with this. But let me interrupt myself, as we usually do, to present to you our two offers free of charge. All you've got to do is dial 888-578-8791, ask the operator, or leave us your information, your contact information on our answering service, and we'll get the material out to you very shortly on a piece of literature titled Who, What is the Beast of Revelation, and a 1-hour presentation titled Where Are We Headed Prophetically. Very important information to accentuate and augment the information I'm going to provide to you over the next few minutes that I have, that will help you to better understand the broader scope and comprehension of this very subject. Just dial that number, 888-578-8791, and hit us on our website too, by the way. We've got a lot more products there for your appreciation, perusal, and hopefully edification that will help you to improve your relationship with Jesus Christ and God our Father. And let me remind you, before we come back to the program, of our special feature of that webcasting opportunity, benefit for you, that if indeed you want to rendezvous with us on a Saturday at the time posted on our homepage, all you've got to do is go to that homepage at www.cgi.org, hit on the link, and go ahead and you will access a live discussion from a minister of the Church of God International or a special speaker that was invited on some topic about the Bible or current living or conditions that we are facing in our world today. So go ahead one more time for both of those free offers, a small booklet titled Who, What is the Beast of Revelation, and a 1-hour CD, that's a CD, Where Are We Headed Prophetically. Both will indeed help you to better understand what I'm about to introduce to you with the remainder of time that I have. Now, back to the program here, and talking about this symbolism that we read with respect to this beast. Now, obviously, there is a lot of symbolization going on here. It's without a doubt very metaphoric, it's very allegoric, and consequently can be interpreted as something that maybe it really doesn't mean literally. And that's the challenge, because quite frankly, there are people in the Christian community called preterists, and they take a very, what you could say, well, metaphoric approach toward this information. They will tell you that virtually the whole book of Revelation is already fulfilled. There is no prophetic value to the book of Revelation except maybe chapters 21 and 22. The reality of it is, as far as they're concerned, the whole book is just symbolic of the tension, the oppression, the anxiety and events that took place in that early New Testament church and its conflict with the Roman Empire on from the first century through to maybe perhaps the half of the second century. But the reality of it is they concede to the fact that it's all symbolic, that it's very metaphoric and very allegoric, and really the only value is historical. There's nothing prophetically valuable to the information contained in the vast majority of the book of Revelation. So the real question here is it in fact all symbolism, and we are left to our own devices to attach meanings to many of these images? Or does the Bible in some way interpret itself and connect up actuality, a literal interpretation where there is intrinsic connection with real life, three-dimensional living? Is there something in the Bible that can give us better context, a better understanding of what perhaps these symbols might mean? Well, let me take you back over to the book of Daniel. Many of you perhaps are familiar with the correlation of the book of Daniel and how it works with the book of Revelation. Over here in chapter 2, I'm not going to take a lot of time to read a lot of scriptures here pertaining to the story of the dream that Daniel interpreted that King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had. Suffice it to say, though, the interpretation of that dream, located in chapter 2 of the book of Daniel, begins in verse 36 of that chapter. And here you see that the dream, we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Now, the point that I want to make here is, though this dream was very surreal, it was all about an image, a head of gold, it had silver, a breastplate of silver and brass, and it had legs mixed with iron and clay, and it was very, what you could say, imagery. It was very artistic in that regard. And consequently, Daniel goes ahead now and presents a very interesting take on this particular dream that King Nebuchadnezzar had. And of all things, proceeds to connect it with reality. Look at what he does here in this particular verse of 38, where he says, essentially, and whatsoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of heaven has he given unto your hand, and has made you ruler over them all. You, King Nebuchadnezzar, you are the head of gold. Then he goes on and he says, and after you shall arise another kingdom. And then he says, inferior to you, then another, a third, and then another, verse 40, a fourth kingdom, strong as iron. And he relates this very artistic image to four kingdoms and the material. Now, this is an interesting take, because what we're beginning to see is God is very artistic. God is very creative. God is using art, imagery, to attach reality. We're talking about kingdoms. We're talking about land here, geography. We're talking about kings and people. We're talking about laws. We're talking about actual places and objects of which have value in the prophetic realm that God is attempting to try to explain to us, will help us understand the end times. Now notice over here in chapter 7, the book of Daniel. In chapter 7, we find a similar description of kingdoms, but attached to different images. That's right, they are attached this time to different images. A lion, a bear, and a leopard with 4 heads, and another fourth kingdom, which was very terrible, and it had 10 horns. And this 7-headed beast, because you have the lion, and you have the bear, and you have the leopard, which are 6 heads, because the leopard had 4 and 2 are 6, and then you have this very ugly beast, which is the 7th head, that had 10 horns. So now we have a 7-headed, 10-horned beast of which we're told here in Daniel 7 that these great beasts, in verse 17, notice this, which are four kings, four kingdoms, and of which shall arise out of the earth. But it says here in verse 18, the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom, possess the kingdom forever and ever. So as I've often said, the good guys win in the end after these four kingdoms arise and do their dirty deeds. And suffice it to say, and I'll cut to the chase, the reality of what we are reading here in Daniel 7 overlays on Daniel 2. You will find that the lion and the bear, the lion was Babylon, the bear was the Medes, and of course the leopard was the Greco-Macedonian Empire led by King Alexander, of which was then dissipated into four kings, Cassander, the Seleucids, and then the Ptolemies, and I forget the fourth one, but then essentially distilled down to the king of the north and the king of the south, represented by Ptolemy, and the king of the north represented by the Seleucids. These images related to actual world history is now then brought forward almost, in this case, Daniel wrote about 500 years before Revelation was written by the Apostle John. So now we have the Apostle John. Let's go back now to Revelation chapter 13 here for a moment, because we now begin to get some context in light of Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, whereby now we can see when we read about these animals what God is telling us. And what God is doing here is He's being very artsy. Notice what he does here in verse 1 of chapter 3, the book of Revelation. He says, I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Well, that's what Daniel 7 showed us. 7 heads, 10 horns. And it goes on. And upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his head the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard. Imagine that. Now we're going backwards. We went lion, bear, leopard in Daniel. Now we're going leopard, bear, lion in Revelation. And in this particular case, we see the Apostle John claim that the dragon gave him power and his seat and great authority. And we all know that the dragon, I won't belabor the point, but I'll cut to the chase, represents Satan the devil. And this fourth kingdom, that is this kingdom with the 7 heads and 10 horns, is driven by Satan the devil. Now we already read verse 3 in this particular case, so let's just move on here to verse 4 for a moment. And they worshiped the dragon, that is the source of power that was behind this government, and gave power unto the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who's like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great blasphemies, and a power was given unto him to continue 3.5 years. That's what 42 months represents. It's going to be 3.5 years. He opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme His name and His tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and notice this, and overcome them. In Daniel 7, we're told that this beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns is actually going to have its way with the saints until the Ancient of Days returns. And he will serve to change times and places and wear the saints out. He will persecute them. He will kill them. And that's what John is saying right here. It correlates with the story. Daniel correlates with Revelation, and what we're seeing here is a substantiation of the same story extended out over 500-600 years by 2 different guys that are essentially saying the same thing in so many words. It's an amazing realization here, my friends, if you don't recognize it. And what you're understanding is a communique from the very living God of the universe to teach you about the picture that you can expect as you proceed down through history and approach the end time and the final battle in the valley of Jehoshaphat, labeled Armageddon. Notice what he says here. We pick up the story. Blasphemy, verse 6, against God, to blaspheme His name, His tabernacle. Verse 7, it was given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. Power was given to him over all kindreds, tongues, and nations, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not found in the book of life and of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Those who will become citizens of this system will worship the beast. And later on in this chapter, I won't take the time to read it, but you can read it there in verse 16, that he causes all, both small, rich, and great, to receive a mark. This Greek word means a scratch, an etch, some kind of a dig, some kind of an attachment, a stamp of some sort. I don't know if it's technology. I don't know if it's an embedded chip. I don't know if it's a combination of perhaps those Christians who want to observe certain days and or eat certain things or not work and observe on certain days. I don't know. Maybe it's a combination of all of that. But I do know this, that if you don't have what this government requires you to have, you're not going to be able to work. You're not going to be able to live within the society. You won't be able to become a sociocrat. You won't be able to be a citizen of this. Notice what it's called. Oh yeah, we know what it is. Chapter 17. Look at this. Babylonian system. In chapter 17 and in verse 5 we read, and upon her forehead was the name written, Mystery Babylon. Why in the world would the Apostle John, of all things, use that kind of terminology to articulate and connect the identity of this end-time super world ruling power? Why? It's obvious. What is the imagery in Dan 7? Dan 2? What did Daniel tell Nebuchadnezzar? What did Daniel, interestingly enough, see in the second vision revealed and disclosed in Daniel 7? That it is a Babylon. That's the Genesis. It was founded in the Genesis of this kingdom is in Babylon. And it developed into the Medes, and it grew into the Greco-Macedonians and morphed into Rome. It is a Babylonian, Greco-Roman resurrected system. That's what we're being told. And later on, takes on the position of becoming a king of the north. And this beast ingratiates itself to become well known, and through wealth destroys many people. Imagine that. Imagine that. This beast, this tyrant, this dictator, who is going to coalesce a socialistic system that is going to be a combine of 10 kings who pool their assets together and support this beast, who is also supported and essentially promoted by a religious arm called a false prophet, continues to gain power and prominence. And you can read about the destruction of it in Revelation 18. If you read between the lines, you will see how big this system gets and how beneficial it is. It is prosperous, and it benefits the whole world. As a matter of fact, it benefits the whole world so well that when it finally is taken down, the world mourns its destruction. Here in Revelation 17, we are told that this is the great whore that sits upon many waters in verse 1. Verse 15, we're told what those many waters are, and it corroborates chapter 13 of what John said, that the beast would rule many kindreds and tongues. Notice, verse 15, Revelation 17 states the waters to be the very thing that John said previous in chapter 13, that he says unto me, verse 15, Rev 17, the waters which you saw where the whore sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And so here you begin to see that this great world-ruling power is going to accrue such prominence with the accumulation of assets of 10 other nation kings who for a short time, the Bible calls it 1 hour, will pool their power together with this tyrant. And we also know, as chapter 17 here shows, that this 10 horned in verse 12, which you saw are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast, they have one mind. It is a socialistic, world-ruling, world order system. And it says, shall strengthen unto the beast, these shall make war with the Lamb. In other words, when this happens, and we begin to see this going on, we know it is this system, my friends, that is indeed the end time system that will make war with the very Lamb of God. That's right. There is a time coming. That's where we're headed. Prophetically, we are rolling along to acquire a world order that is going to be a combine of 10 nations, socialistically operating under the rule of one dictator that is supported by a religious system called the false prophet and will take the world by storm. My friends, this is a time of very, very dangerous conditions. In Daniel 11, we're told very clearly that there will be a military associated with this Babylonian, Greco-Macedonian, Roman resurrected empire. And it is going to invade the Middle East after it is kicked by a king of the south. What did I say? History repeats itself. A king of the north and the king of the south. Previous was the Seleucids against the Ptolemies. In the latter days, a king of the north, a Babylonian system, will kick against a king of the south and invade the Middle East. Oh yes, my friends, this is going to happen. And the only thing stopping right now much of this from happening is one obstacle. And do you know what that obstacle is? My friends, it is the United States of America that is restraining the socialization of the world and what appears to be, most recently, due to Brexit, to a lesser extent, a populist movement of Britain and, to a lesser extent, Israel. The United States, Great Britain, and Israel, the restraints that are holding back much of the momentum that is moving toward a social order that will ultimately play out in this particular resurrection of the very city that John names in the last verse of Revelation 17, where he says, "The woman which you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth." And it isn't Mecca. Time's run out from me, my friends. Go ahead and dial now, 888-578-8791. Get the additional information that will help you to better understand with clarity what this is all about. The literature, who and what is the beast of Revelation, and the 1-hour presentation that will go into more detail about where we are headed prophetically. Both are free for the asking. All you've got to do is dial that number or hit us on the website at www.cgi.org. My friends, this is Bill Watson, reminding you always to keep on that armor of God.
Armor of God and the free material offered is brought to you by the Church of God International of Tyler, Texas. You may write to us at 3900 Timms Street, Tyler, Texas 75701, or call toll-free at 1-888-578-8791, or call 1-903-939-2929 during regular business hours. You may visit our website at www.cgi.org or email us at armorofgodcgi.org. We appreciate your prayers and support.
This program is sponsored by the Church of God International and supported by our viewers.